Hello children, today we are just going to learn about the garden farming. In my last video I had just analyzed about the commercialization of agriculture. From there you have just come to know that one of the most important crops for the commercial crops, that is regarded as the commercial crop, and that was very much important for the English East India Company, and that was the chief crop for exporting from India to other country beyond India. That was very much lucrative and the profit was so high, that was indigo. And for that reason, whenever the Indian peasants, they were just forced to cultivate indigo instead of different paddies, corn and all this sugar cane and all these things. So that's why the indigo revolution became very much important during that period. I think we are just going to we'll just surely discuss about the indigo revolution or the indigo rebellion of 1859. Finally the indigo rebellion that will just come to an end in the year of 1859. Hopefully there will be a good video in future on the regard of that indigo rebellion or the indigo revolt, but our today's topic is as because I have already shared with you, that will be garden farming. So first of all you have to know what is the meaning of garden farming. Garden farming, if you just translate this term in Bengali, this will be called Bagita Shilpo. Actually, the garden farming played a very vital role for draining the India's wealth to the other countries, especially to Britain at the time. What has happened in this garden farming, and why did garden farming become so popular amongst all the English East India Company and their planters? Especially few regions or few states were chosen by the English East India Company and their planters for the better benefit. It was perhaps in Bengal, Darjeeling, Jalpaiguri, Shiliguri. It means the mountainous area of West Bengal. For Assam also, in Assam also, as because Assam was a chief one of the chief points or the state from where the tea could be just produced. So the tea production, yes, the tea production also became very much important during that time. For the production tea was also considered as one of the most important commercial crops. Commercial crops, why? As because tea was exported from India to other countries, and from where a very good number of foreign currency could be just earned by the English East India Company. So just like that, what has happened, the tea production in West Bengal in different places, I have already mentioned the names of West Bengal like Shiliguri, Darjeeling, Jalpaiguri, the mountainous area, and Himachal Pradesh also. And during that time it was the region that was chosen from Assam for the better production of tea. You all know, children, from your geography book, I think you all have just read about that the tea of Darjeeling, it's having a great market not only in India, in the whole world. The tea production of India, it was very much important since that time. So the British, they for the first time sought to think that the tea and coffees, all these products should be just exported from this country to other countries. And what was the basic reason, what was the basic cause behind that for producing this kind of garden farming? Why did the British and English East India Company become quite enthusiastic for this kind of production? As because you all know that English East India Company was a merchandise community, and their only intention was to just carry out the profit from India. They were not at all interested or enthusiastic to see that how the farmers, the Indian farmers, they had just earned their livelihood and all these things, whether they were strapped down by the British pressure, the British torture, extortion, exploitation. They were just least bothered about that. Every time they were looking forward for their own benefit, and that was their main motto, that was their main aim in their life. So that's why the garden farming was also a very vital tool or implement for the English East India Company to put upon the pressure on the Indian peasants and to just carry forward all the benefits from India. So just earlier I have mentioned that in West Bengal and Assam, these two provinces, these two different states were the pioneer center for the better tea production, whereas South India was chosen for coffee production. So coffee was also one of the important or the chief cheap products by which the English East India Company could just earn a huge profit. So what was happened, if you think that children, that what is the problem with that, what is the problem with the cultivation of tea and coffees and all these things? Actually, tea and coffee, all these crops are called the beverage crops. You know it very well, children, that the teas and coffees, all these crops are the beverage crops. So during that time, the regions, the forest regions or the mountainous regions, all these regions were handed over to the English East India Company. And those who were very much interested, those who had just come from abroad and they had just given a huge amount of money to the English East India Company and their authorities. They had just got all these forests as a lease. Lease means, what is called lease? Suppose this is a particular area. This is a particular area and I'm just going to provide it to a particular person. He will cultivate here for next 5 years. What he will cultivate here, what will be the spending amount, and what will be the earning amount, and what will be the profit from there, I don't have any work with that. I will only collect, suppose for after the completion of one single year, I will just I will collect 50 lakh rupees from that particular person. So this is called lease. When after the completion of the 5 years, when the tenure will be just, when the term will just come to an end, after that a new contract will be made, either or it can be just cancelled after the term, means after the 5 years. So this was happened. And who was benefited by this garden farming? Most of the times the beneficial it was, means the benefit it was done for the English East India Company and their traders, means those who had just spent a lot of money for the development of the garden farming, they were benefited. The Indian peasants or the Indian farmers, they had to just work over very hard, as because they were only the assets, they were only the workers. They had to just work over there just like a beggar, just like a borgadar, just like that, but they did not just achieve anything after the completion of one day. So that was the problem of the Indian farmers, and the Indian farmers were absolutely, during that time also, they were exploited by the English East India Company. So English East India Company, most importantly, they had just handed over all these lands to the British sides, to the British aristocrats. The British aristocrats, they had to just come here. They had just purchased all these lands from it was from North Bengal, it was from Assam, it was from Himachal Pradesh, and all the mountainous areas. They had just started to monopolize their business and trade. So when crops and all these beverage crops are being just used, are being just monopolized to just fulfill the evil intention of the English East India Company and their officers, that came to be known as the commercialization of agriculture. And most importantly, children, don't just forget that commercialization of agriculture was just introduced for the better benefit of the English East India Company and their men only. The Indian peasants were absolutely just humiliated and exploited by this policy. By introducing this policy, the British government, they wanted to just take the highest profit from India. Now, in which way they got exploited? Let's have a look. In an example, I'm just going to show you that how were they exploited by introducing this kind of system. Previously, the peasants and farmers, if they could just yield, they were associated with paddy farming and all these things, they could hardly earn their livelihood. At least they could not just eat something after the day, at night they could just eat something. But when the garden farming was introduced, they were turned to, previously they were called peasants and the farmers, now they were turned to borgadar, means they had to just work over there, and finally after very hard toil they could easily get, hardly get the salary, or the salary, what can I say, this was a daily wage they used to just get, and the salary, most of the cases, it was given to the English East India Company. So this was called the drain of wealth. Means, what is the meaning of drain of wealth and what is the theory of drain of wealth? I will just come by my next video. I will just explain you in great detail that what was called the drain of wealth and what is the sponge theory. I hope you will just come to know from there. But this was called the drainage of Indian wealth to their own country. This was the system by which they had just drained out, they had just taken all the Indian wealth from their own country. The Indian peasants, they were no longer be called that the peasants or the farmers. Most importantly, they had just become the tenants. So for that reason, later on when the revolution just broke out, different times the peasant revolutions and the peasant uprisings became so much vital. The peasant uprisings held a very important significance, great historical significance in Indian history. And for that reason, finally in the year of 1885, the English East India Company was supposed to just create and to just publish and to just means introduce a new act for the betterment of the Indian peasants, as because they also came to know that the Indian peasants are the actual asset of India. If we ignore them, if we torture them, if we exploit them in this way, India will no longer be called the jewel of the English East India Company. If we want to just carry out, if we want to just continue this kind of exploitation from India, if we want to just get profit by this, the Indian peasant should be given few opportunities. So that's why in the year of 1885 a new law was enacted, a new law was initiated by the British government. I just mean to say, in the year of 1885 Bengal Tenancy Act was passed. I repeat, Bengal Tenancy Act of 1885 was very important, though it was passed by the British government. But by passing this act, the right of a land, it was given, it was directly handed over to the peasants, and it was clearly stated that no Indian peasant, no Indian farmer, and no Indian riot will be just convicted. There will be no encroachment from the land. They will not be just convicted from their lands without having the British judgment, without having the British consent. It means they are now just getting the land property, land as a property, land as a grant. They will have their dalils with them, they will have their means legal paper with them, and they will never just get evicted or convicted from that particular place. So after passing this kind of act means Bengal Tenancy Act of 1885, there was less news that we have just come to know that the Indian peasants were just convicted, they were forced to just convict or convict from one place to another. So this news became absolutely just extinct at the time. Okay, so we're discussing about the garden farming. So in this farming, so every time the English East India Company, they were benefited, and the Indian peasants, they became the worst sufferer for this. And what was happened next? For an instance, it is also given an instance because the garden farming and due to the commercialization of agriculture, how did the severe condition it just come out for the lives of the poor peasants? Let's have a look. It was in the mid of the 19th century when when the American Civil War just broke out. When the American Civil War broke out, during that time, the British government, they used to collect the raw cotton from India. Previously, means before the outbreak of the American Civil War, they used to just collect the raw cotton from America, as because for the production of raw cotton, America was very much superior during that time. So that's why they were very much well acquainted to just collect the raw cotton from America before the outbreak of the American Civil War. But when the American Civil War it broke out in the mid of the 19th century, during that time the British, they sought to think that this is not the correct time to just collect the raw cotton from America, because the American Civil War was going on. So that's why English East India Company thought, the British government, they thought that now they will just come to India directly, they will just collect the cotton from there. At the time, the situation or the economic condition of the Indian farmers, obviously it was just went on a high. The situation, even the farmers at the time, they were, especially from Deccan, they became so rich at the time. They had started to just take lend money from debt from money lenders, and the money lenders, they had just given debt to all those poor peasants, because they knew very well that after if suppose they are just taking the debt from us, they will be surely able to just provide and to just give back our money with the highest interest. But what has happened after the completion of the Civil War in America, in Deccan, what has happened? It was seen that when the Indian peasants, the peasants of Deccan, they had just taken the debt from the money lenders. At the time, a contract paper was signed. In the contract paper, it was assigned, the peasants, they were assigned that if they fail to just provide the principal amount with interest, if they fail, at the time their land will be seized, everything, their house, their utensils, everything will be just confiscated, it will be seized by the money lenders. So what has happened, and when the Civil War of America, it just came to an end, and for that reason they did not have such kind of luxury with them, as in with the abolition and with the outbreak of the civil war in America. At the time, the situation or the economic condition that was very good for them, but finally when it was just ended, when it came to an end, since that time Britain again started to just collect the good quality cotton from America, not from India, and that was one of the most important causes for the downfall, economic downfall of the Indian peasants. So the Deccan Riot that became very much important during that time, the Deccan Riot of 1875. The Deccan Riot became very much important. It was a kind of farmers' rebellion or the farmers' uprising in India, in Deccan history, in the history of India also. And this Deccan Riot that was started since in the month of May, and that came to an end in the year of September in that particular year. So Deccan Riot also, it was also rebellion from the sides of the Indian peasants. So you can see, children, that every time means since the very beginning, the Indian the farmers or the agriculturists or the peasants or the rats, they were the worst sufferers of this thing. So now our next topic is the trade policy of the English East India Company. We know, children, that in the year of 1757, when the last independent Nawab of Bengal, he was Sirajuddaulah, he got defeated. Since that time, the English East India Company, they had started monopolizing Indian trade, commerce, especially Indian administration too. So what was happened next? It is seemed that since 1720, oh, I completely forgot to tell you, children, that what was the chief exponents, what were the cheap goods for the British. They used to just import from outside, and what were the cheap goods that were just sold outside of the market. Which products, which things were just exported and which things were just imported. So import and export business was absolutely, it was not virtually, it was in reality that was just completely dominated by the English East India Company before 1720. So in the year of 1720, it was clearly stated by the English East India authority, the British government, that as because India is as because in the year of 1720 a law was just enacted, a law was just passed by the British government. It was a kind of a protection policy. This is called the protection policy, by which it was clearly stated that now onwards the Indian cotton cloths should not be just imported to Britain. The Indian cotton cloths should not be imported, it should not be just exported to Britain, I'm sorry. So why so? As because there was a huge market, there was a huge demand for the Indian cotton cloths, especially the muslin of Dhaka. I told you, children, that it was so silk, it was so just for what it could be just kept inside a matchbox. So that's why there was a huge market, there was a huge demand for the Indian products or the Indian cotton cloths. But by passing an act in the year of 1720, it was clearly stated by the British government that not a single piece of cotton finished product or the sari, it could be just sold, it could be just exported from India to Britain. Now previously the Indian farmers or the peasants, they were at least they were not very rich, but they could just earn their livelihood. They could just eat. They could just fill up their stomach in a day. So finally what has happened, instead of that, the raw cotton will not be just sold out, the raw cotton will not be just exported to their country, but instead of that they will sell something, they will import something. Most important, the spices that were very important at the time. The spices and different types of metals were imported from their own country to our country, and the Indians, they were just bound, they were forced to just purchase all these things. In this way, the increase in trade and commerce played a vital role for the development of the English East India Company, and whereas Indian industry got stuck with all these things. And this system, this policy came to be known as the deindustrialization. This term, you should know it very well, children, that what is the meaning of deindustrialization. Actually, the opposite condition of the industrialization is called deindustrialization. Now, I'm just going to explain you that what is the meaning of deindustrialization. Actually, what has happened, the Industrial Revolution, it just broke out in England in the year of 1760. By just introducing different kinds of scientific examinations, scientific revolution in England, the Industrial Revolution broke out in the year of 1760, and since that time, England was quite England became very prosperous, very rich, as because in different cities of England like Lancashire, Manchester, Oxford, in different places, the different big factories were set up for the development of making cotton cloths. For making the cotton cloths, the raw materials were also just collected. It was also just exported from India. So India was the exporter country, but finally when the Industrial Revolution just broke out in England, since that time India was turned to exporter to an open market for the British goods, as because inside our country the British goods were sold at a very cheaper price. So suppose for instance two different markets are available in front of you. One market is open for you, and where you can just go over there, you can just purchase the goods at a very cheaper price, and that are very fancy. And second thing is that these all are the Indian products or the native products. Those are very costly and not fancy. So which products you were just going to purchase? I'm pretty sure about that. You were just surely just going to purchase the goods that have been just imported from outside, from Britain. This was happened. So previously the Indian, they were having a great market, a great demand of the Indian cotton cloths or the cotton goods to other countries, but the Indians, they were just forced to just bow down their head in front of the English East India Company. Intentionally they had just done all these things, and the situation got deteriorated after 1820. After 1820, the British government, they had also just enacted, they had just adopted, they had just initiated an act, and for that reason now it was clearly stated that the Indian products will not be, Indian finished products will not be exported to Britain or any other country. So Indian products will not be just finished products. Mind it, children. The finished products or the finished goods will not be just allowed to sell outside of the country, whereas the British, they could just easily capture, they could just easily purchase. Yes, I don't know whether they used to just purchase or they used to just forcibly collect all those raw materials from the poor peasants or not, but still, as because written in the book, they used to purchase all those raw materials. Those were very important for the development, for the construction of their in making their cotton cloths and all these goods in their own factory in Lancashire, Manchester, Oxford, in different cities of England. So since 1820, India was turned into an open market where the British products could be sold, and the Indian finished products will not be launched, will not be just sold out to the other market. This was the main intention, and that was just boosted up finally in the year of 1853 after 16th of October. You know, children, that why the date is very important in the Indian history, 16th of October 1853, as because the day, on that day, on that very day, the first Indian rail line, first Indian rail was just hauled from Bombay, Boribandar to Thane. It was on 16th of October 1853. Okay, in my next video I will just tell you that I will just surely discuss about the Indian railway system, how was it developed, and who was the real creator for the laying down the railway system in India, and what was the interest and what was the benefit, what was the necessity behind that forward the English East India Company, especially the Governor General of India during that time, Lord Dalhousie, became so much enthusiastic for the establishment, for the construction of railway line in India. That will just come later, but before that I just want to tell you that this was a system by which previously in my previous video I have already mentioned, I have already told you that in which way by introducing that fact. What was that? That was the commercialization of agriculture, the commercial venture, the commercial commodities, and with today's video today's topic, that is surely, what is that? That is the garden farming, in which way the Indian peasants or the Indian farmers, they had just got stuck with a severe blow. It is a fatal blow for all the Indian peasants and the farmers, and most importantly, previously they were farmers at least, but now they will be called the beggar, they will be called the mendicants, they will be called the vagabonds, as because every time they had to just fulfill the aspirations of the English East India Company. The English East India Company, they were not at all very thoughtful for the better development of the Indians and the Indian sepoys. Hope this video will be very helpful for you. If you like the video, just give a thumbs up and just subscribe my channel, and I'll be just back with a new video, the next video that will be on railway system. Till then, stay safe, stay home. Thank you, children.